You're most welcome to this episode of Besters. In this episode, we are going to compare the Milo that's from Australia and the Milo that we can get in Malaysia. So Milo was launched in Australia in 1934 with the philosophy of taking kids' development seriously. So the Australian Milo costs 31 ringgit and 90 cents in Malaysia. That's almost $8 for a 460 grams can. The Milo, the Malaysian version, costs 30 ringgit and 90 cents. That's also almost $8 for 1.5 kilogram can. So that's slightly more than 3 times the weight compared to the Australian Milo for about the same price. So the Australian version seems to be marketing it as a health and sustainable choice. The Australian Milo has 55% local ingredients, meaning Australian ingredients. And it's low GI, certified at about 40 to 41 depending on the type of milk that you mix it with. And it has also UTZ certified cocoa in here. And the Malaysian version is, at least it seems to be marketed as an energy drink with many sports figures. There's also someone playing football here. So this is, the wording seems to be more towards of an energy drink. So the ingredient difference, the main ingredients is malt, barley and rice in the Australian version, or rice malt, and the Malaysian version seems to state it as malt, barley and starch, so I'm not sure if it's the same thing. It's milk solids in the Australian version, and soy, lecithin and palm oil on the Malaysian version. So that's the main difference in terms of ingredients between these two. And for the nutrition information, the serving size for the Australia Milo is 20 grams, and the Malaysia version, it's 30 grams per serving. Both have nutritional information in the 100 grams area, so I'll use that to compare the difference between these two. So per 100 grams, this has 400 kilocalories, and for 100 grams of this, the Malaysia version, we have 413 kilocalories. So it's almost equivalent in terms of calories. Protein wise, it's 12.3 grams on the Australia version per 100 grams and 11.7 grams on the Malaysia version. Fat is almost equivalent, 9.7 grams on the Australian Milo and 9.9 on the Malaysian Milo. In terms of sugar, it's slightly higher on the Australia version, 4.3 grams per 100 grams, and on the Malaysia it's 40.5 grams per 100 grams. There's small variations in terms of nutrients. So the main difference is the calcium content. It's 830 milligrams on the Australian Milo and 520 grams on the Malaysia Milo. And vitamin D is also high on the Australia Milo, 13.5 versus 5.0. So there's a bit of differences in terms of instructions, how you prepare this. The Australia says mix 3 heat teaspoons with hot water, not boiling, or cold skim milk, Doesn't mention the volume of milk that you need to skim milk that you need to mix this with. Malaysia has two versions of the instructions. One is 6 teaspoons, not heat, as compared to Australia Milo, which they measure as 30 grams with 2 teaspoons of milk powder and 200 ml of hot or warm water. Or the alternate one is, if you don't like it with dairy, 6 teaspoons with 200 ml of hot or warm water. So for comparison, I'm going to use 30 grams of the Australian Milo and 30 grams of the Malaysian Milo and mix both of them with 200 ml of warm water. And yeah, let's just compare how these two will taste. Okay, so right here I have 300 grams of the Australian Milo and I have 300 grams of the Malaysian Milo. So the first thing I noticed when I opened both the cans is that they smell rather different. The Australian Milo had a more milky smell to it and a deeper coca aroma to it, and the Malaysian Milo had doesn't have as strong as a coca flavor to it or smell to it, but it has a maltier smell to the Milo. So yeah, in summary, this smells a bit more chocolatey and milky, and the Malaysian Milo smells more malty. So what I have here is 200 mLs of water, and they are currently at about 70 degrees Celsius, and I'll mix them up and let's see what happens. So 30 grams of Australian Milo into 200 milliliters of warm water. So it seems to be quite soluble, dissolves almost instantly, it melts in the warm water. I'll just give it a stir. Yeah, so solubility of the Australian Milo seems to be quite good. Just a bit of lumps, but yeah, that could be my error. And let's try the Malaysian Milo in 200 ml of warm water. The solubility seems to be quite similar. In fact, seems to be a bit more soluble. The aroma is quite strong, but I can't tell from which it is from. I'm not sure if you can see, the Australian Milo is slightly creamy on the top. I'll just give it a smell. It definitely smells quite milky and slightly chocolatey. I'll give the Malaysian Milo a smell now. It smells quite similar. It smells quite similar, but it's slightly different. The Australian Milo smells slightly milkier, slightly stronger in terms of aroma compared to the Malaysian Milo. Now let's just give them a taste. So 30 ml of Australian Milo in 200 ml of water. Oh, and one thing, when I measured this out, I tried 3 heaps of teaspoon, and it did turn out to be about 20 grams, so it's pretty accurate on the description. So I'll try the Australian Milo first. Pretty okay, not too sweet, quite smooth, bit milky, and yeah, I could smell the chocolate a little bit. Smells a bit fresh, the chocolate. So I'll try the Malaysian Milo next. It doesn't taste as milky as the Australian Milo, and the coca flavor is not as strong as the Australian Milo, and the sweetness is about the same. I can't tell them apart if one has more sugar or the other. Yeah, so there's a bit of a quality difference between the Australian Milo and the Malaysian Milo, and I'll just give them a bit of a try. Yep, definitely a stronger coca and milkier flavor for the Australian Milo. So this being 1/3 the weight of the Malaysian Milo, and these two cans are of the same price, I would say it's a tough call which is better in terms of value for money or quality. I would say this is definitely better quality in terms of the flavor of the coca and the milkiness of it, and the Malaysian Milo, it's I think it's a staple in Malaysia, and yeah, this is definitely a good value for money, I would suppose. You get what you pay for, so it's the same price, 31.90 ringgit for the Australia Milo, and 30.90 for the Malaysian Milo, 3 times the volume. Yeah, so that's the main difference, and yeah, that's my uncanning of the Australian Milo and the Malaysian Milo. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching, investors.